Hello everyone and welcome back to the first episode of the ROKER RAPPORT Podcast 2019-20 season. Last week was meant to be the inaugural episode of this season, but in our brilliance we did not sound check properly, and so the episode could not be aired because the sound was fairly poor. And I'll tell you what else was fairly poor: Sunderland's performance against Oxford yesterday. The lads drew 1-1 with the Yellows in a game many expected us to comfortably dominate, but alas, that was not the case. Before we get into that, I will just introduce you people at home to my friends here in the studio. I call them friends. I doubt they'd call me that much. I'm extremely irritating. Let's go to Josh, first of all, on my right. How are you, Josh?
I'm good, Alex. How are you?
I'm not bad. I'm okay, given recent events.
As good as you can be.
No, I'm not as good as I could be, no. Paddy, how are you, Paddy?
I'm good, Alex. Not too bad, mate, yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. That's very positive. I'm sure that reflects how you're feeling inside as well, that phrase.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good stuff. And I'm also joined by Craig. How are you, Craig?
I'd say we're friends. If that's any consolation, nobody else has mentioned it so
Thanks,
far.
Craig. Thanks, Craig.
Let's get off
bring that up, Craig.
Let's get off to a good start because we're going to go through yesterday's performance. But yeah, I'm okay. Slightly underwhelmed with the football yesterday, but we'll touch on that.
Well, that's okay. Craig, you always were my favourite, to be fair. I'm just going to put that out there. But we need solidarity in these dark times when our football club is grinding out 1-1 draws at home to Oxford United. So, let's talk about the game itself before we have the three-word review. Sunderland drew 1-1 with Oxford United in their first game of the season. A fairly cagey first half was sadly punctuated by a defensive error from Conor McLaughlin, which allowed Oxford's Fosu, I believe he's called, to race through one goal as John McLaughlin sort of sells himself early and the Yellows frontman puts away the first goal for 1-0. There would be no more reply in the first half, but in the second, Lyndon Gooch was brought down in the box with only 2 minutes on the clock, and that earned his side a penalty, which he subsequently took and converted, bringing the scoreline to Jack Ross's favourite 1-1. And naturally, because we got 1-1, we wouldn't see any more goals. The rest of the game was a pretty frustrating affair. Oxford, aside from their one goal that they scored through a defensive mistake, seldom threatened substantially, and Sunderland, while dictating most of the play and putting many attacks together, couldn't find the final ball in what was a very frustrating set of attacking movements. Really quite annoying, but of course we'll get to all of that in good time. So let's just whip round to our three-word review. You all know how this works. We ask the good people of Twitter to give us their match summary in 3 words. Let's see what we've got. Jake Hanna says, "We'll be fine." Phil says, "Please sell Flanagan." Macaminio says, "Grigg offers nout." John Ridley says, "Constant dissatisfying performance." Chris Cam says, "Collective buyer's remorse." John Ollier says, "Big crowd, bottled." Jeff Turner says, "Pie's still nice." Chris Cam again says, "Please gamble responsibly." Connor will never leave us.
Justice for Connor.
No, Connor's not in the studio, but he's in my heart, and he'll never leave. Michael Bowers says, "Same old cack." Liam Kennedy says, "Sack Jack Ross." We have Ben Lowry, who says, "Hopeless at crossing." Liam says, "Bring back Keno." Michael Forster says, "I'm from Wallsend." And we have Mick Stacey saying, "So am I." Chris FSTP says, 1-1 draw. Jeffrey Potts says, "Not good enough." Phil Smith says, "So predictably predictable." And someone called Smooge with about 10 O's. I think that's going to be like a smooge, but we'll play on. He says, "Feeling very deflated." Dave B says, "First game, relax." Max UK says 99 points left. And Ryan Palliser says, "Deja vu." So, yeah, I think I've spoken enough now. We all have a pretty good indication and grasp of how the fans feel about yesterday's game, and I'm sure many of those sentiments are reflected here in this room. So we're going to start with you, Josh. What did you make of yesterday's game?
Same old in a lot of ways. Dominating possession, making no real clear-cut chances, very predictable going forward. It's very obvious that it's just out wide. We have nothing in the middle, and that's very easy to defend against when our 2 strikers are under 6 foot and they've got a defender who's like 6'3". I think Dickie is, who I was really impressed with. So in that sense, we were really predictable. We look terrified at the back still. We're still going ahead with trying to play it out from the back. Just doesn't work. And that's why they scored their goal, essentially. I haven't seen the penalty back, but I don't think it was a penalty from where I was sitting. So in a sense, I think we were lucky to even score. I mean, you look at the Charlton game, we didn't score. And I think if it wasn't for that lucky penalty, we wouldn't have scored again. And going back to pre-season, we didn't score in 3 games. So that's a massive concern as well.
So do you think, I mean, I know a lot of people sort of discredit pre-season games as nothing more than a warm-up or a chance to sort of blood a new system or new players. But would you say that therefore the pre-season games in which we had 3 in a row without scoring are significant?
I think they are now. I think when you look at how we played, and you look at, did we really open Oxford up? No. I think you have to take that into account in the pre-season form, especially the last couple of games where you kind of get into the business end of pre-season and we're still not really looking like we're opening teams up.
Yeah, I think
that didn't change in the Oxford game.
I think that's absolutely a fair point. We'll go to you, Paddy, now. So what we've spoken about there, obviously, it's the most sort of fundamental flaw in the team was our inability to break Oxford down. And I would agree with Josh. Aside from that penalty, we didn't really look like scoring at all. And if it wasn't for that penalty, I doubt we would have scored. What is the issue with going forward? Why can't we do it? Why can't we just score a goal from open play? Or why couldn't we?
I mean, my thoughts from yesterday was basically we're going forward, we get the ball in midfield, and it just looks like we don't know what to do with it. You look at the team sheet and you think, we've got 2 strikers on the pitch. We've got maybe we can see like a return to Gooch's form, what he showed at the start of last season, and the way he just like get at fullbacks and get in behind and get the ball in and everything. So you've got to think like the way we set up, we should have been basically throwing ourselves into it more than what we did. We're going forward and it's almost like I'm expecting every move to break down. We think like, all right, we're playing out from the back and then, our full-backs are moving it forward and it's getting into the wingers and they're bringing it back inside. But then it's like, where's the movement after that? There's not like the fluidity there, what we've seen from, for example, some of the teams who went up last season, the likes of the Barnsleys and the Lutons, where they'd be going forward and the opposition defence were backpedaling every time. We're not making defences look panicked. And I think that's it's something which really have to change. And I did think that maybe the start of this season, things might have changed. But I think what we've seen before about the lack of goals and attacking threat in pre-season, it is starting to sort of show itself more and more. And I think with it showing itself in the first league game, against, let's be honest, a team who we should be beating if we want to get out of this division, I think it is quite concerning.
Yeah, so would you say that the main issue there, I mean, as you say, I think you're totally right that we didn't make the Oxford defence look harried or, even, I think at time even remotely sort of moved at all with what we were doing. So would you say that perhaps we're just a bit too cagey, that maybe, it's a phrase I heard last season and I think it rings true at yesterday's game, that we show Oxford too much respect?
Definitely. I mean, like we just, whenever they're coming forward, it's just like, even like our fullbacks and sometimes even our centre mids were just, there wasn't the first thought of, like, before this guy gets a run on me, why don't I put the first challenge in or close him down? Because by the time our players are thinking of making a challenge, the ball's across the other side of the pitch or an attack's sort of, it's begun and, it's miles away from where that bit of play was. We're just a couple of yards just off the pace. I mean, I just think going into sort of the games we have later this month against, your Portsmouths and Ipswich and Peterborough, I think it's got to be out of our system, basically, sooner rather than later, I think.
Absolutely.
I think a big problem that we haven't learned from last season is we need to be a bit nastier in games.
Well, that's it. That's showing Oxford too much respect, isn't it?
Yeah, because Oxford came to break the play up. They were kicking the ball away when we got free kicks, all that kind of stuff. And the fans, it riled them up massive. It worked. And we didn't know how to react with that. And we just didn't deal with it whatsoever. They were just using, like Jamie Mackey made those 3 centre-halves look average just with how he was kind of just being a bit of a dick. And it was working. And he was just kind of, giving them a sly elbow here and there, just gamesmanship, which at this level you get away with because the referees aren't the best, which we know about again from last season. And we just don't know how to deal with it.
No, I think that's, Jimmy Mackey in particular, he was a real nuisance.
Absolutely. And
in the technical and I think in the sort of like physical, verbal sense, he was really just sort of giving it big for large portions of that game.
And Woodburn, who only joined Oxford days ago, and yet he's come in and he's looked like he's been there a year.
He's quite a promising prospect, Woodburn. There's a lot of, I think, raw ability there.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, obviously, Carl Robinson's been very clear with Woodburn, just be a nuisance, just get at them and annoy them.
And it works.
And I don't know why we don't do that.
Well, I think that, again, that comes back to what we were saying, though, isn't it? Doesn't it, really? But yeah, I think what I want to do there is focus on what you just said there before, Paddy, about players looking a bit like maybe they're not quite on it as much as they should be with regards to the other team getting the ball, and we're closing them down and we're harrying them, and we're, as you said even further before, that we're not really putting them under the pressure we need to, that perhaps maybe the pressing isn't there. When you see a fault in the team and you say, oh, we're not doing this, that normally comes from individuals who aren't doing something. So I'll throw that one to you, Craig. We've not heard from you yet. Were there any players in the team yesterday that you think just didn't look like they were good enough for Jack Ross's fabled 100-point season team?
I hate singling anybody out, especially after an opening day, because I think we could start something very, very kind of negative and just allow it to spiral. I think there was some glaring issues yesterday. I think in terms of this way that we're going to be setting up to play, we're going to anticipate some teething issues. One of the biggest things I noticed yesterday was if Gooch went forward, he would always say have McLaughlin, kind of to cover his position. What I noticed yesterday was when Hume was going forward, Flanagan didn't really fill that void. And I think there was a massive lack of communication between them. And again, obviously a lot of criticism came from the stands. And I think as the game grew on and a lot of passes were going astray from, say, Denver Hume, he kind of went into a shell a little bit. And I think the fragility did set in then. And the longer the game went on, to be honest, it was growing nasty. I think certainly in the area where I sit in the ground. But again, I can understand the frustrations from people because, we've mentioned this 100-point mark. And yesterday we really did need to get off to a good start, set the statement really for what we're going to do for the rest of the season. But I think our weak spots really was from Flanagan. And again, like I said, Hume, he wasn't great, but I'm anticipating a lot more from him this season. But with Flanagan, we've seen it for quite a while now. I think he is one of the weak links. And I think he can find himself fairly lucky to be involved, especially when over the course of the final stages of last season, I mean, Ozturk didn't really do too much wrong. Appreciate he got sent off against Portsmouth, but I would have expected him to fill that role yesterday.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think what you say there about obviously Hume and Flanagan playing on that wing, as Hume's playing as your left wing back, he's required to fill the role of both a fullback and a winger. But that means, of course, that he can't be in two places simultaneously. Should he be playing on the wing, then you expect Flanagan, who's the left-sided centre-back, to fill in for him. That was what I presumed was the whole point of having three at the back. So when I see the criticism that I'm saying that, Hume's got forward there, but he's not tracked back. Well, if he can't be in two places at once. There's not a single player on earth who can be an out-and-out fullback and an out-and-out winger at the same time. So if Hume's going forward, then I personally would expect Flanagan to be covering his back, basically. And obviously, if they're on the attack and we're defending, then of course I expect Hume to defend. But should one of his attacks break down, then I expect Flanagan to be filling in more so while Hume's getting back to help cover. But
I think they both looked uncomfortable in possession. It was definitely a difficult afternoon for them. One of the arguments again that came out yesterday was, look, we've had pre-season and we should have really addressed this formation now. We should, be ready to kind of kick on it and play this. But I think if Jack Ross is, going to stick with this, people might have to appreciate for a few games at least, it is going to take a little while for everything to adjust. But I mean, credit to Oxford, in fairness, they did expose us an awful lot, and that over the course of the game did cause an awful lot more issues, and we should have addressed that. Maybe we should have, had that conversation at half time just to basically say, let's tighten things up there. But maybe that's just, again, we can maybe blame Jack Ross. We can blame anybody really on the pitch for not addressing that. But, credit to Oxford, like I said, for highlighting that, because, again, they will probably go into it later in the game. But, besides our penalty, we didn't really threaten them. And I think they can feel rightly aggrieved for not coming away with all 3 points.
Mm-hmm. If I was an Oxford fan, I'd maybe thought that we could have snatched all three there, because when they had chances, albeit not as often as we did, they looked like they could have made theirs count. They were putting together some very convincing movements when they did get forward. That was helped to an extent by some bad defensive decisions. I mean, obviously, the goal came from a poor piece of judgment from Conor McLaughlin. But that was one thing I was quite concerned with, really, is the general passing from the defence. We'll go back to you, Josh. Is that something that you feel will be a concern about the back three that we've got? Should we use this formation in the future, or
massively?
Could that be put down to nerves?
But it's a massive concern. It was last season, and I don't necessarily think it's just this system. I think Ross likes to play out from the back, because when we were playing a back four, we play out from the back. But unfortunately, we don't have the players that are good enough for it. Willis was brought in to be one of those ball-playing defenders. He didn't show that yesterday. We saw some kind of wayward passing from him. I remember a couple of times where he gave it away under no pressure. So it's either you change the style of play again, so we don't play out from the back, or we just stick with it and hope that for whatever reason they get more comfortable on the ball. But, at least Flanagan's had a season of playing out from the back now, and he didn't look any more comfortable.
I just don't think Flanagan can. And what I'm going to do very quickly is jump into this week's quick question with regards to that. Now, this is something that I'll refer to back at several points during this pod, but basically, as our first quick question segment of this season, I said that yesterday's game was not a good one. There were a lot of things which weren't good. I don't know why I said good there twice. I could have done better than that. Honestly, if I'd looked at that again, I would have found a different word for the second good, but hey-ho. So basically, in your opinion, who or what was the weakest aspect of Sunderland's game? We'll read out your answers on today's pod. So a response from RV, who goes by the handle Harvey86, said, trying to play football in a league that doesn't want to with players who can't. Playing out from the back looks good when done well, but when you pass it to your centre-half who boots it aimlessly, what's the point? And I think that
Exactly.
What he's getting at there is a very crucial point, and could perhaps, obviously I'm praying it doesn't, but this could be a failing of Ross's philosophy in our team, which is that we're playing this three at the back using wing backs. We're having players in quite advanced sort of tactical roles, but ultimately we're doing that with a League One team, and that there are players who I think for the rest of their career may not play a formation or system that's this ambitious ever. Most are going to be used to 4-4-2s and 4-3-3s. I don't know, what do you think, Paddy?
I mean, I think also when it was used during pre-season, I think it raised a few eyebrows, thinking okay, I mean, it looks good, on paper, and if there's a plan behind it, and if it's executed well, then it'll be dangerous. But it's like what we've been saying, we don't have the players who can do that. Ross must know by now that the defenders we have, albeit just being the first game of the season, that Flanagan, he's not the sort of defender who can play that sort of role. And, I do think with Willis and McLaughlin, I do think they'll settle down. But I just don't understand why he's persisting with Flanagan if he wants to play this sort of style of play in this league. Because, as obviously people have answered on Twitter there, that this league, playing really good football, really attractive football, isn't necessarily what you need. It's something which it's hard to put your finger on, but we don't have it. And everyone's saying we've got a really good squad, and yeah, we do. On paper, it is one of the best squads in the league. But if we're persisting with playing a formation what isn't getting the best out of those players, then it doesn't matter that we have the best squad in the league, because it's not going to be our advantage come the end of the season. If we keep on persisting with it and it doesn't work out, and then it becomes more obvious that Ross doesn't have a plan B or doesn't know what to do when things are going wrong on the pitch, then I think it's going to be really concerning.
Mm-hmm. How much do you think, Paddy, we could stand to gain from just simplifying things a bit? Do you think that a manager, let's say hypothetically Ross isn't the manager in charge, and you've got a manager who has the exact same squad, made the exact same signings, but he plays, for example, 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, 4-3-3s, formations like those, and he plays players in very sort of traditional roles. So, for example, Denver Hume is a fullback, Tom Flanagan is a central defender. No one's a wing back. There aren't any sort of specific tactical roles here, not to the depth and extremity of what Ross has given so far. Does that team beat Oxford comfortably, or do we have any of the same problems? Again, we're speaking in hypotheticals, but
I think we'd look a lot stronger. I think if Hume was there just as your old-fashioned left-back, then I think he'd look a lot more comfortable on the ball. I think part of the reason he looked fragile was, as we said, he made a couple of wayward passes, a couple of, wrong decisions, and then things get on top of him. And when he's having to look behind and noticing that Flanagan isn't doing the job which this sort of formation is basically designated to him, then it's going to mean that Hume is thinking about not only his role in the team, but then he's worrying that as soon as the ball goes behind him, is Flanagan there to help him out?
Mm-hmm.
And for somebody of his age, he hasn't played a lot of professional football, first team football for Sunderland. I think that's a worry which he shouldn't need to have. So I definitely think sort of switching back to a more traditional, especially defensively, I'm not too sure about going forward, but I think for me, a more traditional sort of four at the back, even sort of like no-nonsense sort of style of defending, even for just a few games, just to sort of settle everybody's nerves.
Mm-hmm.
If you are going to persist with Flanagan and say have Flanagan and Willis, give them time to sort of have a period together and get settled into just doing what they're meant to do and just be centre-halves and just, be dominating and beating attackers to the ball and just keeping things tight. And then in the meantime, having our fullbacks just be fullbacks and not have to worry about bombing forward and then tracking back and then getting the criticism from the crowd for not being able to do both. Basically, as we said, they can't be in two places at once and they shouldn't be getting stick for that. So
Mm-hmm.
I think probably things need to change.
Yeah, I think what we either want is players like Hume to be getting forward, swinging crosses in, taking on his man, cutting inside, or we want him doing the more sort of fundamental defensive duties as a fullback. I think, we should be under no illusions that we're a League One team. And as a League One team, we should be having players who are in League One and doing, the more basic things. I mean, I've referred to it several times, but when we had Danny Collins on the podcast, we spoke to him to try and get a first-person perspective on being a Football League defender. And he made no mention when we asked him what makes a good centre-back for, say, League One, League Two, possibly Championship. He said, well, it wasn't playing from the back. It was having positional awareness. It was taking the ball down. It was getting rid. It was no nonsense. It was just positional awareness coupled with the very sort of direct get rid of the ball mentality. And I think if you have that from players like Alam Ozturk and someone else alongside him doing a similar thing, I think we'd have a lot less concerns. But obviously, what you saw yesterday were a lot of mistakes in the passing. I mean, I don't know, what do you think, Craig? Do you think that perhaps we should benefit from, or that we would benefit from just, again, toning things down at the back there?
I think the main difficulty for me yesterday came from conceding the early goal, because we looked fairly bright and lively going forward prior to that, or one real kind of effort on goal, if you like. But as we were going forward, Forsu, I mean, he really should have scored pretty much straight away, dragging a shot wide. But
yeah, definitely.
The wing back rules for this formation is absolutely crucial, and because it was you could tell it was a brand new system. They looked like some of them had never played together at all before. But Oxford came, scored, and they had something to protect. And I felt from there was a few times I thought that we would just kind of lose shape, maybe revert back to type, and we didn't. So I think that's Ross's idea to say, look, we are going to continue with this formation, but it's something that I think we should have really tried to address maybe at the start of the summer, to say, look, we are going to persist with this and go out and sign players exclusively for said positions, because I don't think Denver Hume is suited for this. I thought as the game grew on yesterday, Lyndon Gooch, he was okay. He was nothing spectacular as he was, say, at the start of last season. But I don't think we have the right players for this particular system at present. I know we've still got time to address that, whether we can bring any more in. But again, in terms of the defenders we've got, we mentioned Ozturk. I think everybody's just forgot about Baldwin. Granted, I'm not his biggest fan, but what's happening with him? He's not involved in the matchday squads. He's barely been involved in pre-season. Lutons we can write off. We know he's not going to be involved at all. But if Baldwin's not involved, should we not try and get rid of him and maybe bring in a replacement for him? It's quite a concern that Flanagan is still number one on the team sheet, but again, we could do this to death, really. I think until we're blue in the face this evening. But yeah, it's quite a concern, because I think in terms of yesterday, there was no overwhelming expectation for us to basically come out and absolutely rattle Oxford from the offset. It hasn't happened. We've now got 2 very difficult games coming up. And again, the pressure's on straight away. You've got people calling for Jack Ross already. So it's a test of character for everybody involved. Are they going to continue with this system? Are we going to allow, any teething issues? Or are we just going to change it just for changing its sake and just say, look, let's play some less than spectacular football. We'll go out and we'll basically try and shithouse a team like teams have done at us and just try and get 3 points.
Absolutely.
If it works, I'm all right with that. I'm fine with that. I think I've had enough of this trying to play nice football, and it's hard because obviously you see Luton win the league in the manner that they did, but they had Premier League fullbacks. Like both of them got moves to Leicester and Bournemouth respectively. So we're playing with wing backs, and we're not playing wing backs in those positions.
No,
Gucci obviously isn't a wing back. Hume is clearly just a fullback, which is completely different. So to me, my concern with Ross is there seems to be a stubbornness. It's like we're going to play this way and this way alone. And I think to be a manager, especially at this level, you have to kind of adapt to certainly the team you have and the league you're in, and playing. Well, to be fair, we're not even playing nice football. We're trying to, but we're not really.
What we're playing would be nice football if the players we had were better. Like if we had, if
only we were Man City.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could always say that, couldn't you? I mean, you could make. I mean, obviously Pep Guardiola could go into like a bottom division under 9s Russell Foster youth team and go, right, we're playing tiki-taka, we're doing this, we're doing that. But obviously, you're not going to have the resources at your disposal to put together what you want. And I think, in a less extreme case, Ross is having the same predicament here. I think what he's got is a very sort of well thought out, very well calculated idea, but he wants to play out from the back with defenders like Tom Flanagan, and Tom Flanagan can't pass water. He can't. I really just don't rate him at all. And I know. I mean, as Craig says, I don't want to single out players, but for me, it's very concerning that we've heard talk from Donald about 100-point season, and we're starting Tom Flanagan. Tom Flanagan isn't a member of an 100-point team in this league. I'm sorry, he's not.
Do we think we've set the bar too high already in terms of getting 100 points?
Well, that's the thing. Now, we heard the 100-point talk from Donald, didn't we? That's what we heard.
That wasn't Jack Ross.
No, exactly.
It wasn't Jack Ross. It was Charlie Methven and Stuart Donald sat in these chairs, and they were clear to say that this season we were going to smash this league.
Is that not a bit ridiculous to sort of instantly put that kind of pressure on?
It's enormous.
Yeah, on like Ross and the management team and the squad. Like with doing it on like obviously on a podcast, and you want to be enthusiastic, you want to be optimistic about the upcoming season, but after the way last season ended, I mean, you got to think it's a bit it's too far of a leap, surely.
Yeah, it's huge. You're not just saying. We expect to win the league next season. You're saying that we expect to dominate the league next season, and those are two entirely different things. Now, Luton won the league last season, but they were taken all the way by Barnsley, us, and Portsmouth, and Charlton. Well, more so Barnsley and Charlton towards the end of it. Us and Portsmouth fell away, but for me, it's an enormous expectation. I think it's very important to clear up the misconception that Jack Ross wants an 100-point season. I mean, I'm sure he does, but I think he'll be under no illusions that is a massive ask. He has to get everything, completely right from the get-go for that to even transpire. And, forgive me for being a pessimist, but I can't see 100 points this season. But I couldn't see 100 points most seasons, really. But
I think it put a marker on his head straight away, didn't it?
Yeah.
And Jack Ross.
It's a target on his back.
Yeah. Jack Ross's comments yesterday straight away is, we can't afford to be satisfied with a point at home. We have to look to win every game, of course, which you'd expect anyway. But there was instances last season where there was kind of a couple of home games where we came from behind and withdrew, and we came out the stadium, went, right, okay, it wasn't great, but nonetheless, we've done okay to steal something out of this. We've preserved an unbeaten record for a while. But this season, I don't think anybody is going to come away satisfied with a result like yesterday. Especially, again, no disrespect to Oxford, but that's a team who the expectancy for them this season is survival. And realistically speaking, with the team that we've got, with the bench that we had yesterday as well, we should have blown them away. And it's just, I can't see that happening in any games coming forward, especially with the run-up that we've got now. Ipswich, we've got Peterborough at the end of the month. Portsmouth, we know, are absolutely notorious for coming here and giving us a tough time. So I think the longer these kind of performances go on, I think Jack Ross is under an enormous amount of pressure.
Oh, definitely.
And I think when a fan base, I'm not necessarily going to say anybody's turned against him. You see a lot of things online, people saying we need to get rid of him, this, that and the other. That's fine. Everybody's entitled to an opinion, but nothing's changed in the ground as of yet. There's been no kind of, audible sections of people saying get rid of him or anything like that. But, that could come. If we don't get through this month with, I don't know, a position within the top two and say at least have kind of put some away comfortably, then it's going to be difficult. His days will be numbered.
Yeah, let's say, for example, that you go to Ipswich and you, let's say you lose. Let's say you play Portsmouth at home and get a 1-1. How precarious does Ross's position then look, Paddy? Like, how quickly will this sort of unrest deteriorate into sort of full-scale, we want him out, we want a sacking, we want the board to get rid and get us that 100-point manager you've spoken about on the airwaves?
I think it will be pretty concerning because I think the fans won't expect us to wipe the floor with the Ipswiches and Portsmouths, but I think to say if we get 1 point from them 2 games, I think it would highlight that we can't really compete with them, because I think 1 point from them 2 games really doesn't give out a good any sort of good vibes for the season going forward. Because if you think that in the first month we've arguably got the 3 teams who are going to be up there, come towards the end of the season, and you've got to think that if we're struggling against them and we just haven't really made an impact against the teams who we should, who will be giving us the sort of the most challenging games this season, then I just think it's going to be underwhelming going forward into the season. And I think it will be concerning. Like, for example, if we do lose to Ipswich and then say if we draw against Portsmouth, we don't play very well or we get turned over, I'm not looking forward to the atmosphere at full time against Portsmouth, because I just think if we've had 2 performances where, like against Oxford, where we just haven't really turned up and we've let the opposition boss us, then this 100-point claim just becomes a joke, and it's just going to continue to turn the fans against the team. And it's just it's not what we need.
Well, that's it. I mean, I just think when you analyse a comment like that in light of everything, I think it's just it's a big thing to place on Ross's shoulders, and it could very well become the albatross around the neck. It's a dangerous thing to claim the manager is going to get you when obviously again it's the first game and there are going to be teething problems in a fundamentally new formation with new players who many of which haven't played with each other before, much less in such a new system. But it's just there's a lot to expect, and I'll get more into that in a bit, but what I want to do now is draw our attention back to the quick question, because we have 2 responses that I find very relevant to where this discussion is going. So one of them comes from Mac and Matty, who says, Hume was our weakest player. Far too many times he was out of position, which gave them too many goal-scoring opportunities. His crosses were appalling too. Our weakest aspect is what we do in the final third. We always get the ball there, but waste the chances we create. And the other one, on a similar note, comes from Mobile Mackham, who has 2 separate points. He says, 1, our primary method of attack seems to be through the wing-backs, neither of whom are good enough to carry that weight. And secondly, the ball is almost always either the final ball is almost always either the wrong choice or poorly executed. So we've spoke about, obviously, Denver Hume and how, there what we have is we have him being accused of doing 2 separate things wrong. On the one hand, obviously, is he's out of position when he's defending and giving them goal-scoring opportunities. But then on the flip side, his crosses are also poor. And you have to possibly think that if he's meant to do 2 different positions and he's that stretched, then he's probably going to get them both wrong because he's far too harried. But we've been over that, obviously. What I want to focus on here is the final third now. We haven't spoke about this in too much detail. We have a third response as well from Tim, who says that the main problems were Flanagan, Hume, and massively Grigg. So let's talk about those 2 different features of our game there, Will Grigg and the final third. So let's start with the balls in the build-up to what could be goal-scoring opportunities. Why were they so bad, Josh? Because let's be under no illusions, the final ball was shocking.
Mm-hmm. But at the same time, they don't really have anyone to aim at. I said on the podcast that we tried to record last week, that
but failed.
Yeah, but failed. That in pre-season, I noticed Grigg he just will not run to the near post, and I noticed it again yesterday. I remember in the second half when McNulty kind of went free on the left, and he crossed it in, and Grigg just did not break a neck to get in there. Like, he should have been there. It was a good cross from McNulty, but Grigg just. And I know, we've talked about not singling people out, but I'm really losing patience. And I know there's been talk of like this system. We're not playing to Grigg's strengths, and to a point, I kind of sympathise. I do, but there's no excuse for not putting in the effort, because we're not. This system isn't playing to Gooch's strengths. He's not a wing back. Or Nine, like last season, we weren't playing to his strengths, but they're putting in the effort. They're putting in the work. Whereas I look at Grigg and he's closing down his half-arsed. He doesn't win anything in the air because, again, that's half-arsed. McNulty showed me a lot more than Grigg has for the time he's been here. And McNulty played for, 75 minutes? So I'm just really struggling to blame anyone other than Grigg, if I'm totally honest. I think we look very dull at the point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what I want to do is come back to what Mobile Mackham says, because I'm going to play devil's advocate there, and I'm actually going to defend Grigg, if only for this brief conversation in one context, because overall, I feel like he's leaving a lot to be desired with how he's done so far. But anyway, so what Mobile Mackham said in his first point was that our primary method of attack seems to be through the wing backs, and that I thought was definitely the case. Ross is clearly a big fan of playing from the wings. We tried a lot of cutting inside, a lot of overlap last season, and it looks like we're going that way again. In the first half, almost all the attacks came through Denver Hume, bless him. And obviously, you're putting a lot of pressure there on the shoulders of a young lad. I mean, ultimately, yeah, all our attacks were sent through him, and I think Ross likes to send attacks through the channels. But the issue there is that if, say, you've got someone like Hume whose crossing is quite poor, or is perhaps making the wrong decisions, then what you have is that you have your lads in the middle, like Grigg and McNulty, both of whom, as we've said, are under 6 foot. They're going to struggle to latch on to any headers if we're swinging the ball in. Now, Lyndon Gooch is a good crosser of the ball, in my opinion, or well, at least compared to Hume, is a good crosser of the ball, from what we've seen, anyway. But I think that's your issue, is that they had a big defender, I think you said earlier, Josh, who was just knocking them away. What we don't do is play through the middle, and what we seldom do, is play through the middle, and that is where Grigg's looked the best. So I'm going to ask you this one, Paddy, on your opinion. I don't know whether you want to go with me or against me here, but if we played through the middle, could we see a lot more from Grigg?
I think we would, yeah, because I know a lot of people have said that to get the best out of Grigg, he has to have the ball to his feet, and that is frustrating, because as we've said, with him not running to the near post and everything, that is frustrating when you're in the stands and you're seeing a ball come in and you're not seeing your centre forward, break a neck to get in there. Like we said earlier, and really sort of look like he wants to get on the end of it and, find the back of the net. If we just ran at defenders and just looked a bit more, just to take a risk, just to, like yesterday, we're picking the ball up outside the box, and it's like, I'm not saying shoot all the time, but we get the ball sort of 25, 30 yards out, and instead of looking to put the ball straight in the box, we're instantly going back or playing it out wide. It's like there's no sort of, nobody wants to take a risk, and I think that's what fans in general, if you take a risk and it doesn't come off, they'll see that you've tried something different, and okay, it hasn't worked out, but it's every time. It's like there was a couple of times we had free kicks yesterday, and it ended up, I don't know if it was Maguire who took it short, and then it ended up just a few seconds later it's back in with Oxford.
Yeah, it's just that's it. It's
and it's like when you're on the box,
especially for somebody who's capable of smashing a ball.
When you're around the box with a set piece, your first thought should be, let's get this in the box. Our defenders are up there, centre halves, we've filled the box, we're going for a winner, and then we're trying to do this again. It's like overcomplicating things, and it's all these short free kicks and everything, and it's we get a free kick and then 10 seconds later it's an Oxford throw-in. You know, it's this sort of thing what starts to frustrate fans, and to be honest, it's understandable because it's not what you need for a team who want to walk this league, because you're not going to do it that way.
Definitely not. No, and I think that's what you say there as well. I mean, I keep saying what you say there is good, but you know, I think there's something very crucially touching on there, Paddy. What we have there is you get a player to for example, let's say the ball is sent from McGeoch to Denver Hume. Denver Hume runs to the byline. He's got 2 men on him. He doesn't want to try and cut in because he doesn't feel like he can. He doesn't want to cross from there because he'll get cut out. So then he brings it back and sends it back to McGeoch. McGeoch sends it across the middle of the park and it goes to Embleton or Dobson. Dobson sends it back to McGeoch, goes back to Hume. Hume swings across in first time, goes out. I think what the issue we have there is that, as you say, it's a mix, I think, of overcomplicating things and having players playing in the wrong positions. Denver Hume, in my opinion, shouldn't be that far up the pitch. I think he is good at getting forward with the ball, but he can do that from a left back's position, and he can do that more effectively from there. Now, we had Brian Oviedo, who could get forward and swing a crossing, but Oviedo was a good player, in my opinion. Obviously, I think he divides opinion based on what you expected from that wage, but ultimately, I think most would agree he's shown more than Denver Hume has hitherto in his career. And you know, again, Hume's 19. I'm not going to judge him by Oviedo's metric. If we had Hume further back and perhaps we had a better player playing that more left-wing makeshift role, then it'd be a lot easier. And of course, if we can just either hit the ball first time or work it through the middle, as I suggested, and just perhaps, you know, just did what we needed to do in less movements for the sake of simplicity, because it's too calculated, and that's been the more sort of like, that's been the common denominator of Ross's problems.
I think going back to playing through the middle, it's telling yesterday that what did we have, 2 or 3 chances at best? They all came through the middle. For the penalty, for example, George Dobson, edge of the area, passes straight at Gooch, splits the defence, he gets brought down. In the first half, the nice little link up with Embleton and McNulty, chance from 25 yards or whatever. But again, that's the only 2 things that you can recall. I mean, we sat in their half for an awful lot yesterday. We had an awful lot of possession, and realistically, the crosses that we had done absolutely nothing. Don't get me wrong, there was some half decent ones went in there. Not all of the 34, 35 or whatever were bad, but it didn't suit. And then there was a few times when we tried to change it up a little bit and play it on the deck that, you know, caused a few problems. And I think that's when, you know, Grigg looked a little bit alive, because it's like I said, if we can change the system, that's absolutely fine, but it's not his game to be running on and diving on the edge of crosses. No. He's not Charlie White. He's not, say, what Kevin Kyle was 15 years ago. He wants it to his feet. We've seen that last season. His goal and the checker trade against Bristol Rovers, straight to his feet from Max Power, absolutely split the defence straight away. And the one at Accrington a few days after Wembley, ball straight over the top, edge of his foot, and he smashed it in and scored.
Yeah, if you look at all of Grigg's goals,
so simple.
They just, you put the ball to his feet and he just turns his man and then puts it away. And at doing that, he's brilliant. I think. The best example being the Bristol Rovers game. You know, that was sort of like exactly what you would want from a Will Grigg goal. If I had to sort of draw a Will Grigg goal in like a flip book, it would look like that.
I mean, we can again, don't want to discredit him, but he's not that type of striker who is going to get the ball from, say, 25 yards out and beat someone. He's not like what Madger was last season. Madger would basically get the ball, the Barnsley goal, for example, cut inside, and he'd be burying it in the far corner. He's not that type. He does feed on scraps, and his game is really dependent on someone giving him the ball all of the time and making sure that's bang on. And the time that he has been successful, again, very few and far between, but in his time here, it has been by playing such a simple game of football. So whether we are going to, you know, kind of change the game to suit him, who knows? But it's not looking good for him. It really isn't.
No, if that's the way we're playing, if we're playing a sort of like an attacking sort of game where we're passing into space for our strikers, then I think it's gonna look bad on his Wikipedia article. Poor Grigg.
I think McNulty will start ahead of Grigg before long.
Yeah.
If we carry on with this system and with this, you know, philosophy of playing.
Well, McNulty looks like he plays. I mean, obviously, I know very little about most of the players we signed these days before we signed them, but McNulty looks much better suited taking players on, and
He
especially
was
when
brilliant. His
yeah.
link-up play, he looks comfortable, taking it in any way. And I don't know, he just yeah.
What
just
about
showed
without the
so
ball
much
yesterday,
more.
though? In terms of let's look at a comparison. When we had the ball in the first half, from the back, Oxford were really trying to get at us, and I didn't see that from us. I didn't see that intensity of us trying to force errors or anything like that. And that, in fairness, that's how their goal came. They capitalised on a silly mistake. It was a back pass from Dobbs, and lo and behold, McLaughlin couldn't really get there in time to do anything, and they pounced and scored. Now we've got the players with the intelligence to be looking at doing something similar. So again, there is a lot of arguments about Grigg being lazy, but I mean, he didn't run or do anything really yesterday. There was nothing of note. I think in fairness, he could take his shirt off and it won't need washing, will it? He can put that on next week again because he hasn't busted gut. He certainly hasn't done anything memorable, but I think, the longer this goes on, it's a drought of maybe 10, 11 games for our strikers scoring a goal. It is becoming quite a concern, not just him. Charlie Wyke is involved in there as well. And obviously the expectancy that we're going to be beating teams, we're going to be scoring a lot of goals. If these aren't going to do it, then we're going to, again, just become reliant on McGeady to do it. And 2 or 3 people mark him out the game. And all of a sudden, that's it. We've got nothing left now. So
Yeah. It's predictable.
It's 46 1-1 draws.
I think what is concerning me saying about obviously everything going through McGeady, like some teams caught on to it last season. I think this year, I don't think we'll be as lucky.
No.
I think you could even see yesterday, like when McGeady got the ball, instantly there's like 1, 2, 3 yellow shirts around him. And McGeady's one of these where that is going to get frustrating. If he can see like there's just yellow shirts on top of him instantly and there's nobody in red and white close enough to him to help him out, then that's going to get frustrated. And he's no good to us frustrated. We need him to be, if we want to get the best out of him, we need to have the players around him who are going to help him out and basically not just have this thing of, let's just give the ball to McGeady and then, there's my job done. No team can be a one-man team. We realise that when McGeady came on, you got to think, right, going forward, we're a lot better when McGeady is on the pitch. It's a shame, he only got, 10 minutes yesterday?
I think it was about 15.
I think 10, 15.
No, it was 20. He came on the 70 minute, I think. Wait,
Yeah.
no, that was Watmore, wasn't it?
He's still not back to full fitness, though,
Well,
is he? In fairness,
regardless.
the players on the bench yesterday, him, Maguire, Power, they aren't up to speed, and it might be a little while before they are. So the idea of not having that creativity in the team, it is quite worrying, especially going to a place like Ipswich next week. They're granted, okay, they finished bottom of the league last season, but they got off to a good start yesterday.
Yeah.
Again, like us, they're overwhelming favourites to be going up automatic promotion.
It's a problem, though, obviously, because, it's all about momentum, and they've, I know they got a couple of big results in pre-season, albeit against low league, but they've gone to Burton. It's never the easiest place to go. We got turned over there last year. They're a bit of a hoodoo.
I hate how we're in a league where that's like a phrase. It's hard going to Burton.
But it's like...
But it is.
They've gone there, like, I haven't seen the highlights, but of what I've heard, like, it was quite a hard fought, like, not pretty, but they got 3 points, and those are the sort of results which we didn't have last season. We'd go 1-0 up, the other team would come on us at equalise, then they'd sit and just say, come and break us down. And it was worrying how we just couldn't do that. And it's like Oxford did it yesterday. Once we equalised, they still came forward, but most of the game was a case of we're not going to bust a gut pushing forward. Like, we're in your backyard, we're happy with what we've got, come and break us down. And it's frustrating how, once again...
They just took time out of the game wherever possible, didn't they?
Like we had 40 minutes, we had all of our subs to come on and make an impact and just to get that winning goal. And, in hindsight, you think a 2-1 win, it's not great, but 3 points is 3 points. We're not talking about any of this because it's like, we've got the win, wasn't pretty, but we've done what Ipswich have done. First day of the season,
there's the Charlton game again last season.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was so important to just get a win, and it was almost like any means necessary just to get 3 points on the board, regroup, and just think, right, we've had that game, and we've got harder ones to come now, but we've got the momentum going. Now it's just sort of, there's been the big build up to the Oxford game, opening day of the season, and then everybody's leaving, it's sort of going, well, that was a bit of a damp squib, really. Now we've got to go to Ipswich next week, who will be, well, they'll probably have their tails up more than we will.
I'm going to stop you just there, though, Paddy, because what you've just said there, I'll say it again, I found very interesting. You said about, obviously, the Ipswich game, the 1-2-1, and obviously our game is a 1-1, looks like a damn squib. You know, it looks pretty shoddy, drawing it home to Oxford. But then when you look at the Charlton game last season, I mean, we were pretty naff against Charlton. We beat them 2-1, but we beat them 2-1. And as you say, 3 points is 3 points. So, you know, there's two ways you can look at that. First of all, you would say that perhaps the first game is more psychological than anything. Just getting that win gives a belief in the players that a 1-1 doesn't, especially at home to Oxford. But secondly, does that not suggest that perhaps, you know, those among us in the fan base, and obviously, again, you know, everyone, it's a game of opinions, football. You know, everyone's entitled to their opinions. But ultimately, if perhaps you're thinking that, you know, we're condemned to lose our manager and not go up because we've drawn the first game 1-1, is that what you might call an emotional overreaction?
Definitely. But I think, yeah, it's got, you know, if you look at it like last season, you know, Luton, they lost their first game of the season. You know, I don't know what their fan reaction was to that, but, you know, they were newly promoted. They might have been thinking, you know, it's going to be a hard season. But they sort of dusted themselves down, and then, you know, they didn't lose again for another, I don't know how many games it was, but it was a long time, I think.
They're all the
Portsmouth
moon,
lost yesterday as well.
Yeah, and Portsmouth, yeah. So it's, yeah, I mean, it's important not to look too much into it, but I think, as you said, Alex, it is really sort of psychological, because if you look, people who weren't at the game yesterday, if you look at that on paper, you think 1-1 against Oxford, you know, it's a bit underwhelming, but, you know, it's the mindset, sort of, you know, we spoke about the games going ahead, you know, later this month, and I think it was really important to get off to, you know, with 3 points, but ultimately, you know, let's just hope that it's not going to be too much of a problem. We're not going to miss out on promotion by the 2 points, what we should have got on the opening day of the season. You know, you don't really think about it like that.
I think it was yesterday, it was a lot of familiarity for people, wasn't it? At the beginning of the game, it started as, you know, it's the first game of the season. It's a brand new, clean slate for everybody. We'll concede a soft goal. Oxford again, everybody behind the ball. They start to shore things up. We struggle to break them down. And then all of a sudden, it's carried over from last season. Then we haven't scored in so many games, or we haven't done this in so many games. We've drew X amount of games. And that's where it kept, you know, kind of creeping back in. And for the large part, in fairness, I thought the fans yesterday were really good when we equalised. You know, we really did get behind them. And it's not to criticise anybody, but I don't think the boos were warranted yesterday.
No,
not on the first game of the season. I mean, you can be frustrated. That's absolutely fine. I appreciate that. And everybody's paid the money, so you can do whatever you want legally. But come on, you know, surely they've got at least more in the bank in terms of, you know, give it time. Give it 10 games before you start panicking. Because like you said, Luton weren't world beaters at the start of last season. And unless we're going to, you know, win every single game, we're going to drop points here and there. We could still go up. We could still get 100 points. But does that mean on, you know, the remaining games that we drop points, we're going to boo them off every week? I mean, there were some positives yesterday. Granted, just a fair few.
There were a lot more negatives, but there were positives.
There were. But in terms of, if we won that game yesterday in the last minutes when, you know, McGeady's free kick, or when Maguire was kind of horsing around with the ball and lost it, we wouldn't have deserved to come away with 3 points, in fairness. I think a draw was an even result. Would there have still been booed off for the performance because the performance was shit and it didn't really deserve 3 points? No.
Not a chance. That would have been cheered off.
It was just absolute frustration, which has just set in. And I get that. And, it's deep-rooted from, obviously, I think, last season has just carried over. The frustration of watching, say, Barnsley go into the Championship and win yesterday, and Charlton doing it yesterday, and there's us again, we're kind of languishing behind. And again, I just don't think it was warranted. There's an awful lot of football to be played. I mean, we're literally in the opening weekend, and we've got people already saying, let's get rid of the manager, let's sell this one, let's get rid of that one.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but I couldn't agree more.
Nothing's won on the opening weekend.
No, not at all. No, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. the team that starts a season, the formation that starts a season is often very, very different from the one that ends it. We started last season with what, Lutons and Ozturk in the middle.
Don't forget Donald
Don Love,
right
yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Don Love, gone but not forgotten. Miss you, big man. He was there. You have to look at it that way. And what you say there is totally right. And again, you pay money to go and watch the lads. Legally, as you say, you are entitled to do whatever you want within the confines of the law. But when it's 45 minutes on the clock, it's half time, you're 1-0 down against Oxford. It's not been a great first half. It's been largely quite frustrating, more negatives than positives, but ultimately you're only behind due to a defensive lapse of judgment. And you have seen a lot of the ball, given that there have been some frustrations. Shock horror that the manager hasn't picked the exact perfect team and the exact perfect formation in the first game. He'll reflect on that game, hopefully, and think, right, Denver Hume playing wing back there, that didn't quite work, or, Will Grigg still not quite cutting it, wonder what's going wrong here. There'll be some head scratching and there'll be some troubleshooting. But, the players do not deserve, it's just that, for me, there's almost like a moral duty for the new players and the very young players to not receive an absolute cacophony of boos after the first 45, just because the 1 goal down at Oxford. If the 5-0 down, fair enough. The 1-0 down due to a little cheap naff goal that could have easily been avoided and can easily be learned from. They don't need boos. It's for me, that's ridiculous. They deserve more time, the players and the manager, than 45 minutes. Look, if we're 5-6 games in and we're winless and you want to boo, then, you at that point, you're very, no one's going to forgive you no one's going to sort of begrudge you for that. Not a chance. But again, the first minute, the first game, the first 45, and there are, very audible boos at half time. And, what impression does that give the players that they're going to feel in their heads that, we're on the back foot from the get-go. And
especially the new lads.
Yes, especially the new lads, and again, especially the young lads as well. Mm-hmm. Hume and Embleton, in what could be their first real full season for the lads. No one needs that from the get-go. There is time to put this right. We looked poor against Charlton. I would argue we looked worse against Charlton last season, despite the win, than we did against Oxford. We were, in my opinion, pretty crap against Charlton. But you know what? We improved. And I think we're going to improve this time around, and I still think Jack Ross is the man to do it. I think we'll be all right, but I just think that there are going to be some teething issues with the new formation. Anyway, I think we're going to come towards the end there, but as one final point, while I've defended Jack Ross there, I do want to put him under the microscope one last time, and this is because I've noticed across this entire pod there's been a running theme of the criticisms we've levelled at the manager. I'm going to use the response to the quick question, our final one, from Mickey Lawson, who said, Jack Ross's, tactics seem to be getting it out wide, brackets slowly as possible, with shocking crosses. Grigg isn't that type of forward. We need to play through the middle, especially if our wingers aren't fast. McGeady, Maguire, McNulty, Grigg play to our strengths. How can Jack Ross not see this? Now, that phrase there, Grigg isn't that type of forward. We've said that ourselves, and we've also said that Denver Hume isn't that type of player, i.e., an extremely box-to-box left wing back. We've heard that twice now. We've heard it isn't that type of player. Should we be worried that Jack Ross maybe doesn't know his team, Josh?
It's a big question. Yes, I think so. I think, we've had Grigg for a little while now, so we haven't been ever played to his strengths. So there's definitely a question there as to why we aren't now. To me, it seems really obvious. I think to everyone, it seems really obvious. If he's so enamoured with playing if he's so enamoured with playing out wide, we have the wingers to be able to do that. So we don't need our wing backs or full backs providing that width. So we could definitely go to a back four, like we mentioned. Playing through the middle seems really obvious when our best passers are our midfielders. I mean, especially Mickey Ock. I think Power's also a really underrated passer as well.
Yeah.
And our one tall striker is probably our worst out of the three.
Yeah.
So again, it makes sense to kind of play through the middle for McNulty and Grigg. So when you mention it all like that and you put it all out there, that seems really obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously we can just go off on what we see. We don't see, training and all that kind of stuff. But like I mentioned earlier, the stubbornness to play the way Jack Ross has tried to play is what worries me.
Yeah, well, that's
'Cause
it.
I know he had success at St Mirren with this system, and I appreciate that. But if you don't have the players for it, you can't just shoehorn it in.
Yeah, and I think we have to maybe think as well that St Mirren, he was in the Scottish Championship. He won promotion from the Scottish Championship.
Won the league.
Won the league. Now, yeah, look, the Scottish Championship, that's probably a worse division than League One, I think. I mean, I don't know how I don't know the exchange rate of quality between England and Scotland exactly, but I would hazard it's there or thereabouts with League One. It can't be a great division, the Scottish Championship. I mean, the tail end of the Scottish Premiership is pretty naff. So the Scottish Championship must be even, well, logically even worse.
Well, a reminder, we beat his St Mirren side 6-0.
Okay, yeah, well, there you go. There's no better perspective than that, obviously. Very well pointed out there. But that's, you have to maybe think that if Jack Ross can get that system working with St Mirren in the Scottish Championship, maybe he can get it working. But again, this is what we need is patience. And I don't want to sit here and happy clap my way through, through a whole sort of monologue here. But what I think we should be able to, I think, unanimously agree on is that you can't condemn any manager after one game in a new season he's had his first full pre-season. Just give him more time than one game. Give him 5. Give him time to embed and to sort of refine what it is he wants to do with his team. If we get to October and let's say we're not, we're hanging outside the playoffs, then yeah, I think we have reason to believe it's never going to work because we've had ample time by then if you factor in the summer. But
having said that, I'm sorry to cut in.
It's all right.
I think obviously, like we mentioned, we've got Portsmouth, we've got Ipswich coming up. Obviously, if results don't go our way, that won't be brilliant. But what I'll be more concerned about is if we play badly. I think if the performances show an improvement, but we maybe draw or we maybe just lose 2-1, I'll be all right with that. But if we play really badly in those games, that's more concerning, I think.
I think that's fair enough. So I think what we might do is perhaps on quite a pensive note, we are okay to leave that there for today. But as one final thing, and I mean that for real this time, is I'm just gonna go around the table, and I would like each of you to come up with, the team you would play next week against Ipswich, and then irrespective of your team, give me what you think the result's going to be. So basically, think of your own team, and then think of, all that aside, what do you think the score will be if you're truthfully thinking about Jack Ross? So anyone want to sort of a show of hands, boys? Anyone want to sort of take the first one?
Call me negative, but I would probably next week go down there and maybe start with a defensive kind of outlook.
Go on.
I think one thing that we did quite well last season is basically allow teams to kind of huff and puff, and when they tired themselves out, that's when we got at them. So it wouldn't surprise me if we did have, 5 in midfield, say excluding the wing backs. I think we might revert to like a 4-5-1. It wouldn't surprise me to see the exact same team involved again. Whether we are going to look at having, say, McGeady or Maguire come off the bench is a bit of a luxury if we're chasing the game. They are the people you want to bring on, aren't they? Maguire, he normally plays better as an impact sub rather than starting, I think. Personally, I would definitely play a back 4 because I think momentum will be with Ipswich. I think they will want to look to get off to a really good start at home. That'll set the tempo for the rest of the season from them. So, yeah, I think Denver Hume at left back. Again, it would be Willis, is pretty much your number 1 centre-back, isn't he? Ozturk. I'll be honest, I wasn't really overly impressed yesterday with Conor McLaughlin, and we haven't really discussed him overly too much.
No, I think he looked quite good in pre-season, but obviously...
He's a right back, though.
Yeah.
He's a right back.
So... Luke O'Neill played an awful lot at right back last season, and again, he wasn't involved yesterday. Now, is that a sign that he's now going to become, a backup player?
Hasn't he been injured for quite a while? Didn't he pick up a pretty gnarly one in the playoff final?
Yeah, I mean, there was a few injuries throughout the course of the summer, wasn't there? But again, I mean, he had been involved. He came on against Heerenveen the week prior as a substitute, so somewhat surprising to not see him involved. I think I would go with him if he's fully fit. I think I'd play him over McLaughlin. And again, the midfield, this is where you really, you have your issues again, don't you? I suppose if it's the case that you want to give someone license to go forward, maybe have Elliot Embleton, in midfield, pushing and pressing with McGeoch and someone alongside to I suppose, kind of comfort the back four, because that's what McGeoch, I thought, done really well yesterday in terms of he had to drop back deep an awful lot in cover for when, say, Flanagan had gone astray or even Willis wasn't really up to scratch. But again, I think he will be crucial next week. But I can't see us playing two up front. I can't. I don't know. I think that is Jack Ross down to a T. And it's not to be overly negative, but I just don't think we have what it takes to basically go down there and just be aggressive, get in the faces and kind of do what Oxford done to us yesterday, really. But again, who knows really at this stage, but I personally would expect 4-5-1. Again, left wing, right wing, or left midfield, right midfield, that can be anybody. Lyndon Gooch, I thought he'd done okay going forward. And the rest's just depending on injuries, really, whether we've got Maguire back, McGeady back, but who knows? A
prediction is irrespective of what you'd want your team to be. So what do you think, if you're truthfully thinking, what's Jack Ross going to go down there and get with his team? What do you think he's going to get?
I think we'll get beat. Yesterday, I thought we were going to win. I think, obviously, last week's pod, which didn't go out eventually, we all predicted unanimously a win, besides Morgan.
Who got
right with absolutely bang on. Look, I think we're going to get beat next week, and I think that's really going to add an awful lot of pressure to the following week. But look, if we do, not great. But besides that, we've just got to try and remain as positive as we can, because if we do go into that third game and we're still on 1 point, maybe even if we're on 2 points, let's just not turn on the players, not just yet, because Stadium of Light has been a pretty dark place for some of our players. The championship season in particular, every single one of us can be guilty of waiting for something to go wrong and then just exploding. And every single player, they all suffered from that. So if we are going to get beat next week, which I think we will, let's just at least try and go into the following week and just make sure we give everything we've got, get behind the lads as we always can, and just try and churn out a performance. But I think Ipswich, they'll have too much for us. 1-0.
Okay. Paddy, you're up.
I think my sort of idea of a team isn't too far away. I think it will be something like 5 in midfield. And I think we'd have to go back to the 4 in defence. Like I said earlier, purely just to give the likes of Hume just a bit more confidence, just to give him a more simplistic role where, because going to a team like Ipswich, he's not going to need to be bombing forward as much as what we perhaps wanted him to against Oxford. So I think definitely keep him at left back. I would probably persist with McLaughlin at right back, purely because I just don't like the idea of us changing loads of players for the next game sort of thing. So I think purely just for sort of familiarity, keep him at right back. And then I would actually quite like to see Willis and Ozturk play together, because I just don't want Flanagan anywhere near the starting lineup.
Yep.
Midfield, if he's fit, I would like to see Power come in, because as we said earlier, he is an underrated passer of the ball, and I think I would quite like to see him and either Dobson or Embleton, with sort of McGeoch in front of the back four, like we saw him do against Oxford.
So kind of like a 4-1-4-1.
Yeah. Kind of like, I know, like we've tried to play this in the past with Cattermole, a few years back, where sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the sort of opposition we're playing. But I think having McGeoch there front of the back four, and I think if we have a more settled back four, then I don't think he'll have to drop as much as what he had to yesterday. I think he was having to cover 2, maybe 3 of our defenders when they had lapses of concentration. And I know he was playing there to sort of CDM, but we don't really want him dropping back that much. Like, he is there, but he shouldn't be that far back for as much of the game as what he was yesterday. And I think, striker, really on merits, if you're going to play one striker, it should be McNulty. I'd say McNulty. I've got a feeling if we played one striker, it would still be Grigg, which is annoying, but I think it should be McNulty up top with, maybe play, if you want to play Gooch in his out-and-out role as a winger, see if we can sort of bring back some of the form which he had last season, playing as an out-and-out right wing rather than having to worry about being this sort of wing-back player. So I think prediction-wise, I don't think we'll get beat, because I don't know, I think Ipswich I don't think they're quite at full strength yet. They beat Burton yesterday, granted, but I just think it all depends on if we were to play this 4-5-1, it's people just keeping it simple and playing the sort of the roles what they're being put there to do. So I think, honestly, I know it's annoying and dull, but I think it'll be 1-1.
Number 246.
It's the second 1-1 of the season.
I know.
Yeah, but to be honest, Paddy, I was going to do one of these myself, but everything you said there for your ideal team is almost exactly what I would say. I'm in total agreement with you almost. The one exception is that obviously if this is my sort of ideal team, I would probably want Greg up top, but I would want him with a style of play that focuses less on the wings and just more getting forward from everywhere, just in general. With I might even say with more of a focus down the middle. If you're playing Max Power, as we are both in agreement there, Max Power has shown at Wigan and also briefly for us that he's very good at finding Greg through the middle. He knows how to play to him. So I think that would be a great asset to have that already pre-established sort of cohesion between them. I'd be very content with seeing that, definitely. Just a 4-1-4-1, but as you say, without the expectation on Hume and McLaughlin's shoulders of having to play, not Hume and Gooch's shoulders, sorry, having to play as these fairly convoluted wing backs. When it'd be a lot easier just for these types of players to just sort of play one role and stick to one very sort of fundamental role. And I think with Greg having the ball to his feet and having a lot more play through the middle rather than attempts at playing down the wings with overlaps and what have you, which I think is a bit needlessly complicated. I think without Greg having to think about that, obviously all 5'11" of them trying to sort of jump for the odd ball or to try and maybe run into space that he obviously isn't a massive fan of doing, for good reasons or bad, then I think if we just play maybe just more simply with more simplicity and down the middle and with Greg up top, I think then we could do very well. But obviously that's incidental because for my prediction, I personally, and again, a little bit of happy clapping here, I think we'll go for a 1-0 win. I think we're going to be the actual Ross's team. I think he'll tweak a few things. I think we'll see that we won't get it right. I think overall we might be the worst of the two teams all game. But I think that it's going to start to click, and I think we're going to start to see a bit more of clinical play. I think he'll change a couple of things here and there, nothing drastic, but he'll change a couple of things around. We'll look a bit more comfortable, I think perhaps away from the sort of prying eye of a large expecting home crowd. And I think we'll nick something from McNulty or Greg, and I think it'll be 1-0. I think, while Greg hasn't hit the form yet, you can never count him out, and McNulty looked promising. I think one of those will get the goal, and I think 1-0, a goal and no reply. So that's mine. So as our final one, let's have you, Josh. What are you saying?
Yeah, pretty much agree with most of what Paddy said as well.
That's boring, isn't it? Not very original.
I'm sorry. I'd have McLaughlin and Hume as fullbacks, but I'd have them as very defensive fullbacks who won't worrying about going forward too much. I'd have Power, Dobson and McGeoch in the middle, but I'd have McGeoch just shuttling in front of the back four, especially because we're away and we're probably going to be on, the back foot, if you like. I'd have Embleton on the wing, actually, because I think he's confident with both feet, so he could either cut inside or play on the wings, because you don't want to be too one-dimensional. You don't just want to play through the middle or just play it out wide. So having those wingers gives us that option. And for me, McNulty starts, because especially, again, away at home, you need people who are going to put in a shift. So for me, a comfortable start for McNulty.
Good stuff. Yeah. Sorry, I got distracted there. Craig showed me that Sunderland ladies have beaten Hartlepool 12-0. So good on them. Yeah, so just a very quick shout at the end here. Well done, Sunderland ladies.
Team.
Yeah, exactly.
So well, great result.
Yeah, how are the lasses for not getting a 1-1 and getting instead a 12-0? Well done. So yeah, the lads, if you want to find the net, take notes. Sorry, Josh, I didn't catch what you said for your prediction.
I didn't. Sorry. I genuinely also think it's going to be 1-1 as well.
Oh,
yeah,
shocking.
I do.
So, we're at a point now where a 1-1 feels like a defeat because of how...
That's how it felt yesterday.
So much of a joke it's become the 1-1. But anyway, that aside, I think we're happy to leave that there. So we'll be back. Well, I'll not be back because I'm away in California for 2 weeks.
Look at me. Show off.
Nice for some, just going to bit of a flex in there, but I'm
going to have to say that.
Yeah, I didn't have to.
Just said you were away.
Could have, yeah.
Just on my holiday.
Could have, yeah. That's awful. That mind. Well, anyway, sorry. I'm away having a great time on the West Coast.
I hope it rains.
So yeah, you know what, it's meant to actually on some of the days. So you've got your wish. Yeah, it's meant to rain in Monterey. So Anyway, basically, the lads will be back in studio after the Ipswich game to hopefully revel in what I predict is a 1-0 win or anything more than that, as long as it's a winning scoreline. But let's just hope we don't lose, and let's hope that Ross starts to get this right, because while I think we've agreed that it's too early to condemn him, I think the clock is probably ticking, all things considered. On that ominous note, let's leave that there. Thank you and goodbye.